Greetings, welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of the lovely, gorgeous, coquettish Venus through the grand, very, very warm and affectionate but charismatic sign of Leo. It begins on August the 25th. It goes on for 26 days. It's an opportunity to really enjoy connecting with one another, socializing, mixing and mingle. Of course, it can be about romance, but it can also be about creativity in Leo, where our passion, lit up by the fiery energy of Leo, can help us to express our talents, our enthusiasms, our creativity to the absolute max. Now, quite interestingly, Mercury, the planet of communication, emerges from a post-retrograde shadow just as Venus arrives, because Mercury has been in Leo since the 27th of June. Now, its retrograde ended on August the 11th, but the post-retrograde shadow began then, so that's been blunting some of the potential to have those enjoyable encounters, whether it has been socially, whether it has been in terms of romance. So Venus brings a light, a spark, which is really exciting. But whenever a planet arrives in a zodiac sign, whilst we can focus just on the energy of that planet in that sign, there is a bigger cycle with Venus known as the Venus Star Point Cycle. If you'd like to understand more about this, you can download my free factoid by clicking on the link beneath this video. But also, as Venus arrives, it's interacting with other planetary players. This year, some of the interactions are absolutely stunning, but there is one which is somewhat challenging, and that's Pluto. Pluto is going to go into a direct opposition with Venus on the 27th of August, but it is there right from the off. But we also have Uranus in the mix, which can bring some spark and some unpredictability, but we also have Saturn and Neptune. Now, they're connecting well to Venus, but we also have the Moon. The Moon's very much about our emotional connections, how we empathize, how we connect, how we feel things, and that ironically is in the sign of Libra, and actually which is ruled by Venus, and that forges a beautiful link to the arrival of Venus, but a very testing and challenging one to Saturn and Neptune on the other side of the heavens. So there's a lot to share with you. I'm going to give you an illustration based on the solar context, but also the natal event, and that gives us a lot of information about what we can expect over these next 26 days. Now, as we go into September, there is a dramatic and very enlightening link between Venus and Mars through week 2 of September, which becomes exact on the 16th, a lovely sextile. But we are going to see, as Venus moves into the sign of Leo, the natal event chart puts Venus in the 7th house. So that's another echo of Libra. And then I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. But please do also click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and comments are truly appreciated. If you'd like to work with me one-to-one, on the screen shortly, I'll share some of my latest testimonials. It would be an honour to help or assist you, whether it's about relationships or about your finances, which is the other key strand that Venus has. Please also visit my website at patrickarundell.com. You can enjoy my free daily, weekly, monthly and yearly love horoscopes, and also download your free natal chart and get the stunning interpretation from that. Also, you can sign up for your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning. So Venus rules 2 zodiac signs, Taurus which is earth, and Libra, which is air. Earth needs to see something tangible, so Venus's influence from Taurus makes us connected to money, can be about self-worth, our values, can be to do with sensuality, fashion, jewelry, good food and wine, because Taurus is very much about agriculture. Venus's influence over Libra is an air sign, very much more to do with communication, therefore, can be about trying to find a point of contact which is harmonious, can be about being conciliatory, cooperation, collaboration, diplomacy, certainly about charm, but also Venus as influence over Libra, I think, is very much about how we dress. Although Taurus Venus people have a great appreciation of very tasteful clothes, I think with the Libran influence, it's much more to do with the presentational side of things, how we connect to people by the visual side of things. And Venus in Libra can be a little bit superficial. What about Venus in the sign of Leo? Well, it can be immensely romantic, but it also has a desire for attention. So one of the things we can all do with this change is try to find some ways that we can add some spark and some pizzazz to our personal presentation. And because Uranus, the planet of excitement, is linking so positively to Venus as she arrives, this is a great time to perhaps be a little bit more daring about how we dress, or perhaps who we reach out to. The more generous and warm-hearted energies of Leo can also feed into Venus's relating style. But status can be very important to people with Venus in Leo in their natal charts, and they like to be around people who are popular, successful, because there's a trade-off that shines a light on them too. So we could all have a much greater desire to go to parties, to go to concerts, go to art galleries, just really have much more connection to anything that's stylized, but also where we can have fun and get uplift from being around people. So if you have a natural appreciation of furnishings, clothes, music, you're going to want to engage with those things now, but also magnify them in terms of the impact they have in your life. Now, on the screen now, I'm going to share the event chart from a solar perspective, which puts the ascendant, the assumed ascendant, at 0 degrees in Aries, which is the start of the zodiac. And the intriguing thing is that Saturn is in its retrograde in Aries, but is on that first house. So if we have been feeling a little bit lower in energy and spirits, particularly with Neptune being somewhat of a draining influence, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. So I feel that Venus moving into Leo is encouraging us, particularly because Mercury has been somewhat blunted in Leo because of that retrograde season, to try to join in again, to have that desire to connect, which can be very much a Venus principle. But you can see that Uranus, very electric energy, suggesting an ongoing relationship. This is a great juncture to try to recreate that original magnetic interaction that you and yours had. And that could mean by being a little bit more daring. It may be to try to do something different. If things have become a little bit too settled and too much about everyday demands, a great chance to just try to get that reignition of that initial enjoyment that you had. But there's, in the sign of Libra, the moon, and that's really fascinating because that forges a lovely link to Venus itself, a sextile, and of course the sign of Libra, where the moon is, ruled by Venus, so we have some mutual receptivity. So that can create some harmony for sure. When Venus and the moon are on good terms, it wants to enjoy the good things in life, but it also wants, particularly with the moon in Libra, some peace. But we also have Pluto, the planet which is very much about the collective, but in the sign of the community. Aquarius linking back to Uranus and back to the position of the moon. So there's a grand air trine operating on this event, which just suggests that if we want things to happen, we need to get things moving in terms of communication. But we do have Saturn and Neptune in a direct, really quite difficult opposition to the moon. So if you're in a relationship of any kind, whether it's with a friendship, a colleague, someone in your community, someone within your family, where things feel somewhat stilted, perhaps you're around someone who has a tendency to want to control things somewhat, Saturn, that could be something, particularly with Uranus and Pluto conspiring in such a strong way with this event, push us to, in some ways, to assert our power. Because Venus in Leo definitely can be very playful, but it needs to be admired. So if someone's creating the conditions to lower our spirits, I feel that that could create a desire to push back on that. And I have to be honest, Pluto opposite Venus, which peaks on the 27th of August, is a really, really challenging aspect, because it can mean that the power and leverage of Pluto is hidden in some ways by the sophistication of Venus. So we can have, if you like, the silk fist in the velvet glove, but no amount of charm and flattery, which Venus in Leo loves, is necessarily going to change the situation if we feel that someone wants to always get their own way. So if that is a dynamic that's been showing itself recently, you could find yourself in all those different relationship scenarios wanting to do your own thing, be a bit more of a free spirit, meet up with other people, have some moments of play without the responsibility. But of course, as ever, it's the natal chart which really gives us the detail of how this particular Venus transit is going to play out. And intriguingly, you can see, based on Greenwich, the prime meridian and universal time, not because I'm in the UK, if I was in the US, in Australia, anywhere, I still feel this chart gives us an opportunity to all collectively relate in a much more accurate manner. And Venus is in the 7th house. Can't be in a better place than that, perhaps apart from the second, the other echo of the rulership of Venus of Taurus. But of course, Venus in the 7th house, that speaks to that Libran energy. So that's delicious. But we do have Pluto in the 1st house, and that's very much more uncompromising. The 1st house is where we want things on our terms. So again, if there's a relationship where, however much we lean into another person's position and we're diplomatic and we're good at listening and responding to them, but it still seems it's all about them, that can actually be quite a challenge. Also, you can see the moon is in the 8th house, very psychological. That can be where we become very invested. So if you meet someone, particularly with the energy of Uranus creating a spark, and something could happen very quickly, and it could get hot and passionate very quickly too, and it feels right, you could find yourself becoming very devoted and invested in a surprisingly quick way. But the position of Saturn and Neptune across the heavens in the 2nd house, obviously that other Venusian influence, suggests that in an ongoing relationship, if there are challenges around intimacy, shared finance, and who does and contributes what, and someone does want everything on their terms, I draw your attention to Uranus in house 4, and that could mean that someone who's watching this will want to break free of something where they feel very controlled, because 2nd, 8th house energy can be very much about attachment, but also it can be an obsession almost with control, or an obsession of wanting things in a particular way. And Uranus, the rebel rouser, very much the disruptor, can say, despite Venus being in the house of equilibrium, Uranus can say in the 4th house, look, my equilibrium will come from actually realizing that my boundaries are respected. And if I'm very much a giver and I'm not getting, this could be a time when I may need to assert my individual needs. So Venus can be gorgeous. It can be such a lovely energy. It can be the planet of peace. It can be also very much to do with warmth, that desire to have connection. I think connection is such an important thing in so many different ways. And this particular event is certainly, with the help of Uranus, pushing us to get stuck in and find ways, whether it's through shared interest, through maybe crafting, maybe painting, a book club, in some ways getting involved in the community and pushing ourselves through Uranus's house outside our comfort zone to have those connections can be very, very good for us. And for some very lucky people, I feel the next 26 days could see an incredibly important relationship come into your life, because Venus is forging a beautiful trine to Neptune, which can bring true love, but it can also bring a degree of distortion. Less so in the trine, but it is possible. But also Venus in the trine to Saturn can bake in a relationship that's going well. So this has lots of different facets and possibilities, this particular Venus through Leo season. But it's very, very exciting for sure. It speaks of drama, it speaks of fun, but most of all it's pushing us to not just accept the status quo. It is pushing us to be better listeners. That's tricky with Venus in Leo because that wants the attention, but the event chart tells us it is important to listen up, but it's also helping us to realise that if we feel that our passion and joy is being extinguished by a situation, by someone who's a bit of a wet blanket, someone who tends to be a bit negative, someone who may be a bit mean, because remember Venus can be about money. It may be someone who resents our generosity or our popularity. Then this could permeate some kind of situation that does need to be confronted, and that's Venus opposite Pluto. But just to say, as we go into September, on the 16th, we do have a glorious sextile between Venus and Mars, exactly, but also week 2 of September can see some really lovely exchanges, very social exchanges. And also Venus is forging a beautiful semi-sextile through the first 3 weeks of September with the Sun, suggesting if you are a creative, an artist, a musician, you could conjure up some real magic around your talent and inspiration, but in a way that you can actually form into something that's more workable with the Sun in the practical Virgo. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, but just know you can download that free Venus Star Point factoid by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Aries, if you recall earlier this year, Venus, as she was making her way through a sign she's exalted in of Pisces, came into an exact conjunction with Saturn. So I think your romantic or social situation may have been somewhat challenged right back through to around about the 19th, 20th of January. There may have been a disappointment. You may have got to know someone and it seemed very promising and nothing really came from it. Or perhaps a big relationship came to a close, or you went through a bumpy period in an ongoing one. More recently, your physical vitality may have been a bit lower because of Saturn and Neptune in retrograde in your sign, especially if you're born early in Aries. But Venus moving into Leo can bring some warmth, a real smile. It's like a lovely celestial hug. And if you use the energy of Uranus, which can be very enterprising in Gemini, perhaps to engage with technology, it's not necessarily, particularly if you're older, the way everybody wants to go to meet people, but it may be in your particular locality that it's more challenging to have some local interests where you can connect to people. So technology may work for you, you know, with Uranus forging such a brilliant link to Venus. And also you can have a connection completely unexpectedly just in your daily life. And that electricity that arcs between you and someone could be really something to behold. Now, if you are in a relationship and it has become a little bit workaday, the fact that Saturn and Neptune are opposing the moon, that may mean as Venus moves into Leo that you're very conscious of the fact you're not being as playful. There isn't as much joyfulness or flirting. It isn't as connected as it used to be. But use the energy of Uranus to perhaps come up with some fresh ideas, but also of Pluto, which is very much about your future and maybe some mutual friends, to find a way to just re-engage. So if you have found yourself caught up in those mundane workaday chores, routines, a great opportunity now to be a bit more daring and playful. You're at your best when you are seizing the moment, but as earlier this year has shown, it hasn't always been so easy to do in year 2025. But if you want to achieve something in terms of demonstrating your flair, creativity and talent, or it is about your social life, or it is about wanting some kind of very passionate, intense clinch with someone, I feel you do need to take the initiative. And that's really what Venus in Leo is pushing you to do, but particularly as you go into September with Venus forging such an amazing link with your ruler, and exactly on the 16th of the month. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Taurus, you have a particular appreciation of the qualities of Venus being your ruler in Leo, your 4th house. It could see you thinking a lot about redecoration, adding some new soft furnishings, or getting more into nature, where you can find some moments of real peace, tranquility and healing. If you are someone who likes to host, you may also invite some close family members or friends round for something to eat and want to really spoil them, particularly through the first 3 weeks of September, because the semi-sextile to the Sun in the most charismatic part of your chart. But Saturn and Neptune have been simmering away in a very psychological area. And if you're in a love relationship where there isn't a particularly strong emotional dimension and it's something you really crave for, I feel Venus moving into Leo, and also that Mercury has been going through the retrograde in Leo in your 4th house. I feel thinking about this has been something that's been very much on your mind. So you may have been mulling over some very close relationships, but also where to live or how to live there. But Venus, of course, is in an opposition with Pluto. And therefore, if you are considering some kind of property change, what Pluto could do is push you to change something that may, in some ways, have worked well. But there's something going on deep within you that perhaps could be yearning for some kind of alteration. Now, for some of us, we may like being in the busy, vibrant city situation where our senses are always being stimulated by lots of excitement and possibilities. Others of us like to have that much more rural, quiet, suburban place where we can just really be very, very tranquil. So it just depends on your unique personality. But because Uranus is in the part of your situation to do with your everyday resources, a kind of Venusian theme, Uranus is pushing you in some ways to use what you do have in an imaginative way. However, that position of Saturn and Neptune are in a direct opposition with the Moon. So the moon for you is in house 6. So if the practicalities around an existing domestic, emotional or romantic relationship are not quite working, or you feel that someone isn't available to talk about some of the things that are important to you, some of the things that are important at a more soul level or emotional level, to do with nurture and security, that could create an unsettledness, to be honest. And it may be something you do need to confront. And maybe there's a big conversation that has to be had, and it may peak on the 27th with that opposition to Pluto, because Pluto can be about power. Maybe in some ways it's been you who's been masking your vulnerabilities, because I feel we get much closer in all sorts of relationships if we feel safe enough to share how we really feel. But if that's difficult because you feel that someone has to control it on their terms, that could be Pluto opposite Venus, and that could be a family relationship as much as a romantic one. That is a consideration. But if you are footloose and fancy free, there is the chance still to use the warmth and charisma of Venus in Leo. I just feel that if you do venture out, it's likely to be to places that you know well, that you feel very safe and comfortable in, and have a degree of familiarity about them. But certainly entertaining or hosting at home may be something that really does seem very attractive. And if you do play mind host, I think you're going to do it in an incredibly positive way. So underneath this video, you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry, which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Gemini, your ruling planet Mercury, emerges from a post-retrograde shadow just as Venus pitches up in Leo. Divine timing, because I feel there may have been some frustrations in recent weeks because of Mercury's retrograde and shadow periods, but also Saturn and Neptune have been in your sector of socializing, slowing things down. Uranus may have brought a spark into your sign, maybe even made you a bit more aware of where you wanted to create space or liberty from certain connections that maybe had grown a little bit predictable, because of course excitement always sparks you up. But just as Venus is moving into Leo, the Sun's in the part of your chart to do with nurture, and because Virgo is also about virtue, you may actually want to make your home a little bit more functional over the next few weeks. So Venus being in your 3rd house suggests connecting to people, perhaps in the comfort of your home, but people in your community. It may be people in your digital community that you're connecting well to. But you want to be in touch in a heartfelt way, but also your natural skill and flair as a communicator is definitely going to be maximized. Don't be surprised if something you write or say, someone is absolutely smitten by it and finds you utterly mesmerizing. Of course, why not? But just be aware, if you are negotiating something with Venus in an opposition to Pluto, it is important to understand that Pluto can be very much about power and leverage, Venus about charm. However much you lay it on, someone could be resistant to what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to agree. But also it's important to understand that Pluto's pushing you to tune into the parts of your beliefs and values and philosophies that you don't want to give away too easily. So you're going to find that chatty, mercurial part of your nature is right back on form. But I feel that with the Sun being in the sign of Virgo, and ironically with Venus in a semi-sextile through the first 3 weeks of September, that if your connections also are fun, sparkling, but heartfelt. That's the perfect combination on this year's particular Venus in Leo season. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. For Cancer, it's absolutely a delight to tell you that Venus moving out of your sign into Leo could trigger some improvements to your income. It may not happen straight away, it may take through the entire 26 days, but I'm very confident that you will have some serendipity. It's also possible that you could find that if you've been on quite a strict diet, that your resolve could be tested. I didn't say it was going to crumble, but it could be tested because the Venusian influence from Taurus has a great appreciation of good food and wine. With the Sun in the chatty third house of your chart, if you can share the aforementioned lovely good food and wine with friends, someone that you're attracted to, all the better. Just be aware, however, that the moon does start as Venus enters Leo, the journey too, in your 4th house, and it is being crunched by Saturn and Neptune. Some worldly worries therefore could be having an impact on how you feel. Perhaps there's part of you with Venus going through Leo which is just really going to help you to nail down what your relationship to is about an issue to do with finance. Because with Mercury having gone through that extended challenge in Leo, you may have been thinking a lot about what to do. It may have been a bit like the Two of Swords in the tarot, pulled in 2 different directions. Venus in Leo could make you more conscious of what your true worth, your true values are, and potentially the opposition between Saturn, Neptune and the moon push you in some ways to let go of something that has some kind of financial benefit but doesn't feed your soul. And that energy can come up through the restless Uranus in your 12th house, linking to Pluto in the 8th. If you are in a relationship where you and your partner find it difficult to agree, have slightly different values, or one person tends to be freer and easier with money, the other person more cautious, that also can be a little bit of a testing strand which comes up pretty quickly on the 27th with Venus in a direct opposition with Pluto. But there is a fantastic link between Venus and Mars in September, and Venus and the Sun in a semi-sextile. But if you are wanting to just enjoy some kismet, then certainly Venus in Leo can bring it. But if you're thinking more about your longer term plan, or if you want to change your work, you may need to make some hard and fast decisions that go beyond just the warmth of Leo. It's lovely to have that warmth. You can have some good fortune, but I feel also there's something that you've been thinking about for some while that you may need to make a binding decision about. And perhaps by the end of the second week of September, as Saturn and Mercury go into opposition, that could be when you make the final decision about that. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Leo, you know you're gorgeous, but Venus back in your sign can help you to truly believe that. this is a glorious opportunity to move into the moment, because Venus tracking through the 12th house of your chart, the sign of Cancer, may have made you a lot more sentimental and nostalgic. You may have been processing past relationship situations or thinking about people who are no longer with us. For some lions, there may have been a separation, or you've been soul searching about an existing relationship that you're still in. But Venus moving into your sign can also help you to seize the moment when it comes to your individual talents, whether it is to do with creativity, flair, the arts, or perhaps just helping to get people together and providing that spark of leadership. With Uranus feeding into the situation, you could have some very sociable moments over the next 26 days. It's also possible that more than one person will beat a path to your door if you are single, because your allure is going to be maximised. But because of Pluto being in opposition, which peaks on the 27th, if there have been some politics going on in a relationship, and that is what you've been mulling over, it may be the time to actually say how you feel. And Uranus can help to liberate you in a way, particularly if you're wanting something different from your future to your partner and they're not quite hearing it. But because the moon is in the sign of relating Libra, which Venus rules, is in a crunching opposition to Saturn in particular, you may need to choose your words carefully. The other person may not be persuaded by the charm and charisma that Venus naturally can give you. You may need to use a degree of tact and patience as well. But I think because Mercury has been going through the retrograde in your sign as well, if you have just found that generally life hasn't been moving forwards quite as dynamically as you would like, you're going to find that things are going to spark up for you. But I think in some ways giving yourself a glamorous new identity is a great way to get this process off for sure. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry, which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Virgo, your ruler Mercury, has been retracing its steps in the sign of Leo and emerges from that process just as Venus arrives in the sign of Leo. So if you have been thinking very, very deeply about past relationships, or perhaps just processing the emotion from connections that you once had that are no longer in your life, you don't necessarily have to be in touch with someone, but Venus moving into Leo could make you very, very nostalgic, and that nostalgia could influence how you feel about some of those past people or a person. And with Venus going to forge a very strong and positive angle to your Sun through the first 3 weeks of September, if there is someone who you did have a bond with and for whatever reason the circumstances just seem to conspire, that connection continuing or really maintaining itself in the here and now, you could really ruminate, is there the chance that you could take the lead with the Sun in your sign and make that connection to that past person? But it's important for me to say, I don't want to give the impression that all old flames can be reignited in a positive way, because who's to know? All I can tell you is that I feel that your connection to the past, or the more psychological and deeper parts of relationships, are really going to be very powerful. What you may also find in an existing relationship is that you appreciate some time just very quietly with a partner. It may be in nature, it could be going to where there's water, maybe going on a vacation. Any kind of rest and recuperation that gives you the opportunity to spend time together will actually be something to really, really help the relationship. But of course, as Venus moves into Leo, it is forging other relationships with other players. And the angle between the moon in Libra and Saturn and Neptune in your 8th house suggests if you're not aligning with someone in terms of values, in terms of perhaps what you share, maybe the intimacy is stilted in some ways, one of the things that Venus in the 12th house could see you contemplate and think seriously about is maybe a future without that person. But I feel that this will only be where a relationship is somewhat bumping along the bottom. But relationships, of course, can take on many different guises. And with Uranus right at the top of your chart, it may even be at work if you've been in an organisation or a job for a long time. Because Venus can be about money, can be about self-worth. And if you feel your sacrifices are not really being understood or appreciated as much as they could, I feel Uranus applying to Venus could give you the push to do the research, put the feelers out, even if discreetly, perhaps do a confidential listing on an employment site that will help to bring another opportunity your way. So there is going to be the need to embrace the more psychological, spiritual, or even stealth side of what you feel about a relationship or someone from your past, or perhaps around your financial situation. And you may not want to show your hand straight away, and if that's the case, that's fine. But as we go into September, Venus does forge a very strong link to Mars, and at that point I think you could get some kind of reward that's linked to past effort, or maybe it is going to be an offer, or maybe a reconnection to someone does take on more energy, spark and possibility than you may imagine was possible. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Libra, for you, with Venus being your ruler, making her way into the 11th house, that can help you to really bring a sparkle to your social interactions over the next 26 days. Because it's possible that there have been some bumps and scrapes and cancellations with Mercury in a retrograde and in shadow in that part of your situation. But ironically, because the Sun has moved into your 12th house, if you do link up with people from now, I think it's going to be people that you have a particular affinity to. That may be old friends, it could be very trusted people. It may be people that you share a spiritual interest or connection around. I don't think it's going to be so out there social. It's more social with a purpose. But also, of course, Uranus, the planet of electricity and freshness and innovation, is in the part of your chart to do with travel and new experiences. So if you did go off with a person, a friend, a group of people, even a partner, to somewhere that was very healing, but also that you could immerse yourself in, and in a very stimulating way, so a good balance of some interaction and play, but also some rest, that's another way to make this particular Venus transit work for you. Now Pluto, of course, is being in your 5th house, which is very much to do with a romance and has a kind of Leonian vibe, but in the host of Aquarius. If you are in a relationship which you're not quite sure about, you may reach a point where you feel that you're at a crossroads. And because Saturn and Neptune are on your 7th house cusp, particularly if you're very early born in Libra, but just thinking in terms of whole sign, you may find yourself wanting to have a discussion with that person and try to get some clarity. And with the Sun in the 12th house, if you don't get the reassurance you need, it really could make you think very much about a fresh start. But that fresh start could come with the arrival of the Sun with the autumnal equinox on the 22nd of September. But all through the month of September until that point, Mars is in your sign. So that does give you a bit more assertion, particularly with the Sun in the sheltered psychological 12th house. And Venus and Mars are actually going to be sparkling brilliantly together. So another thing that could happen is there may be someone in your social circle that you start to build an alliance or connection with, but you may want to keep it confidential between you. And something could really be starting to cook up as you go into the middle of September, and it could prove to be very spicy and exciting, even if you do want to keep it close to your chest until the Sun returns to Libra. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Scorpio, Venus climbing right to the top of your chart gives you an opportunity to use the diplomacy of Venus very effectively when it comes to your professional situation. With Mercury having gone through that retrograde period and only emerging from the shadow now, there could be some outstanding strands of discussion, things around contracts or job applications that you're still wanting to move forwards with. With Venus aligning with the Sun in Virgo through the first 3 weeks of September, that's a great chance to use your networking skills and that diplomacy in a very effective way. What's not to like? When it comes to romance, however, Venus moving into this area could see a developing relationship take the next step towards a more lasting and a more established way of being. Now, for many people that can be moving in together, perhaps getting the first rental or purchase, or perhaps even getting married. It may even be, if it's pretty fresh, meeting the folks, each other's folks. 10th house very much about parents. But because of the position of Pluto, your modern ruler, in its opposition to Venus, that's intriguing. If there is someone around a relationship who doesn't quite get what it's about, their energy or their desire perhaps to steer it, dare I say control it, could be something that can cause an issue, particularly as their tendency to focus on what's not quite right rather than the big picture and what is going well. Saturn in the 6th house in an opposition with the moon in your 12th, that could actually be very challenging and somewhat damaging. So I would say if you are getting to know someone, it's going pretty well, but there are people on the periphery of the situation who aren't quite getting it. Perhaps the best policy at the moment may be to enjoy things as they are. Because when Venus moves into Virgo on the 19th of September, that's going to give you the opportunity to really start to cultivate those relationships in a friendlier way. But if you are wanting to make progress in terms of professional goals and ambitions, and something has not quite gained the traction you want, that ability to connect, discuss, you can be very shrewd, but also the way that you share your knowledge and leadership skills can be very delicate, and that's something that people can be drawn to. They won't see it as so threatening, they'll see it as an absolute asset. So your people skills are going to be very important around work. If you're taking that next step towards commitment in a developing relationship, don't worry too much if some people around it are not quite getting it. Try to be patient. And if you're single, don't be surprised if you do meet someone through your professional role or interactions, worldly interactions, over this next 26 days. So underneath this video, you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry, which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. Sagittarius, you have a big love of travel, higher education, knowledge, anything to do with exciting new vistas, and that can really be lit up by Venus. Venus has an appreciation of things, so it can be beauty, it can be buildings, it can be fashion, music. And if you're heading off somewhere over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and it is somewhere very different, it can really feed your senses. It can be through the cultural, historical parts of the experience, through the food, through meeting people who come from different backgrounds. All of that can be so enriching. But in ongoing relationships, one of the things that Venus in the 9th house can crave for is a truth, a higher truth. So a feeling that the person you're relating to is really connecting to you, and their philosophies are ones that you can respect. And if there have been some cross wires recently with Mercury in its retrograde and retrograde shadow period, Venus gives you the chance to unravel this. But also the other thing that all relationships need is a degree of spontaneity. And if you're tied due to jobs, travel, children, family pressures, are not really getting the chance to spend time with one another, perhaps in different spaces and different places, you're really being pushed to seize the opportunity, especially with Uranus in your 7th house, to be just freer. That's part of your DNA. Now, Saturn is in your 5th house. That can be about marriage. Some astrologers would say that's more about the 7th house, but for me the 5th house is about the romance, the glamour. The 7th house is the connection, and Saturn of course can be a little bit of a killjoy, but Saturn's in a very stable link to the position of Venus and also to Uranus, and also forging a great link to Pluto. If you say what you mean and you mean what you say, a relationship could be recharged by all these planetary energies. But I feel it does need to be reignited in some way, refreshed. That's something, being a mutable fire sign, you're constantly needing, you're craving stimulation. So if things are too workaday, too mundane, it can be a real passion killer. So as long as there is a truthfulness between you, and you're open to doing things differently, if you are in a committed relationship, this can be a great opportunity to refresh things and to revitalize the spark that you first had when you met. But if you're single, the intriguing thing about Venus being in your 9th house and also the Sun in the 10th, and they're going to be forging a semi-sextile through the first 3 weeks of September, is that you could, through your work or through travel, encounter someone that you really are very impressed by. And being open-minded, something you often have a gift for, is a great way to perhaps just get chatting to all sorts of different people. So even if you're looking for relationships through your interest, through culture, maybe through music, performance, just making connections, which is what Venus is about, which stimulate you and broaden your horizons. That's the huge opportunity that this presents over the next few weeks. Now, what about Pluto's opposition with Venus? If you do encounter someone that you find to be very persuasive, but also you're not quite sure of what they're about, do listen to that. Because one of the things that Uranus in the 7th house is asking you to do is not sacrifice your independence for the wrong situation. So even if you find someone very, very exciting and it makes your pulse race, it's still important to feel that this is a connection that can be purposeful if that's what you want. If you're up for something more fleeting, passionate and exciting, you're certainly likely to experience that over the next few weeks, as long as you venture out into the world and use the passion and charisma of Leo to its fullest extent. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Capricorn, Venus moving into the 8th house in terms of the money side of things could be very positive. Over the next 3 or 4 weeks, there could be some good news over a contract, a pension, perhaps an insurance payout, some kind of legacy, and one of those may be totally unexpected. The 8th house is about shared finances, but also in a more spiritual or even a romantic way, it's where we can be most invested. But the 8th house can also be where things can become much deeper and more passionate and very much closer, but it can also be where things can come to a close. Because one of the things the 8th house with Venus wants to do, it wants to experience some kind of transformation through closeness. Now, not everybody wants a hot and very intimate relationship, but that doesn't mean to say there wouldn't be some physicality in it. But the closeness may come in other ways, just chilling out, holding hands, watching films. But for that couple, that feels very deeply changing, because maybe it's two people who in the past may have treasured their independence. But if you are someone who's very comfortable with being up close and personal, and you're around someone at the moment who's really making your pulse race, the chances are things could get very steamy. But because of Saturn, your ruler, being in your 4th house, and also in an opposition with the moon in the sign of relating Libra, that means your feelings are close to the surface. So if there is a relationship where you feel you've given it absolutely everything, and you still don't feel that the other person can understand the value of you and your commitment and your devotion, Pluto in your 2nd house, or if there's differences over money, all of this could reach a boiling point as soon as the 27th. But if you are footloose and fancy free and you're thinking of going on a holiday in September, you could encounter someone with the Sun in a semi-sextile to Venus, but also in a great link to Jupiter in your sector of relating through the first 2 weeks. And there may be an opportunity to meet and get very, very close to someone, and it may be someone who could end up then being around you in your life for longer than you may imagine. So, a fascinating set of possibilities. If you are a business person, Venus in the 8th house can be very positive. If you're very collaborative with a partner around who does and contributes what around resources, and you share each other's values, that can be very constructive. But if you're at either end of the settee over values and money, that's going to show up over the next few days in quite a powerful way, because Saturn in your 4th house may be making you even more conscious of what's not working at the very heart of that relationship. relationship, and that is something that's been flagged since the 25th of May. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry which is fascinating. And also I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Aquarius, Venus moving into the 7th solar house is lovely. It's about as good as it can get after the 2nd house or the 5th. The 2nd house, of course, is very redolent of the energies of Taurus. It can be very good for money. The 5th house can be very joyful, playful, flirty, just very Leonian in a way. But the 7th house is really the flavour of Libra. It's that ability to interact, to hear other people, but also in a gentle way assert what we need. So over the next 4 weeks, if you do meet someone and you really, really like them, it could be a relationship that can endure. Because your two rulers of Saturn and Uranus are also feeding in to the exact position of Venus as this journey starts, that's great, because Saturn in your 3rd house may be in retrograde, but it means that what you say is likely going to be what you mean. But Uranus in your 5th house can help to liberate that playful, quirky side of your nature, which actually can be one of your most alluring qualities. But Venus in the 7th house is also very, very good for ongoing relationships. It helps us to let go of the things that don't quite unify us, perhaps to celebrate the things we do have in common. So having Venus in the 6th house can be a little bit more about the practical gestures we can do to please a partner. The 7th house, it is much more romantic. Now, some astrologers would say Venus in the 7th house is the sector of marriage. So it is certainly an opportunity, if you're getting to know someone or a relationship is taking giant step forwards, to feel that much more confident of investing in a relationship which has a good balance between the give and get. That's the critical thing. But what about Pluto in your sign in an opposition to Venus? Well, if you are someone who tends to run a little bit on the shy side, I feel that what Pluto can do is give you a little bit more Dutch courage when it comes to reaching out to someone you may be intrigued by. And also in an existing relationship, I feel it can strengthen you if you do feel there are certain topics or patterns in the relationship that you would like to reset. It can give you just that extra little bit more assertion to say how you feel, but say it in the right way. But for sure, when Venus and Pluto are in opposition, we can encounter a situation where someone will maximize the leverage through the veneer of charm, and we just need to be very conscious of getting through that. But I feel that as long as you're connecting to someone who for you is genuine and resonates with you, you feel that you're heard and and you're able to hear them, and that interplay, that sharing, that mutuality, is that collaboration is really the most joyous part of Venus through its Libran energy. It just so happens to be hosted by the glorious, proud Leo, and therefore suggests if you can bring some romance into an ongoing tie, do something that really showcases each other's gorgeousness, then why not? That could be by treating one another to a new haircut, going on a spa day, going out for a lovely meal. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry, which is fascinating. And also, I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also, there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid. So Pisces, Venus moves out of the sector of romance into the sector of practicalities. What does that mean? Well, do you know, the very best of relationships, there may be those moments of spark, but the tummy goes over, of adoration, but often it's the everyday humdrum things that someone thinks to make a cup of tea when someone's feeling a bit weary, puts the washing out, puts the hoover around. Those thoughtful gestures can be really, really helpful. So in an ongoing relationship, just consideration can actually be such a lovely thing. But if you do want to meet someone, don't be surprised if you did meet someone in a very practical way over the next few weeks. I know these days that the internet or technology is probably a way that a lot of people do make connections, but it could be in the most ordinary of situations, at the vets, if you're taking the dog for some inoculations. It may be in the supermarket queue, waiting for the tube or for the bus going to work. Those kind of situations can be where you could just become much more aware of someone's charisma, Leo, but also if they're someone who seems to be, in a way, practical, a person you could do business with. That could actually really work for you, particularly as the Sun is in your 7th house of relating, is going to be coalescing with Venus in a beautiful way through the first 3 weeks of September, but also Jupiter, the planet of joy and fortune, your ruler, still is in your sector of romance and forges a fantastic link with the Sun in your sector of relating through the first 2 weeks of September. So this can be a time, even through those ordinary, mundane experiences of seeing someone or getting to know someone, that actually a person creeps up on our senses, or we can reinvigorate an existing relationship by just being or using some old-fashioned charm, consideration and thoughtfulness. So underneath this video you can download my free Venus factoid. It tells you about the mythology of the sign. It also shares about the Venus star point. It's an 8-year cycle. It's really interesting. It has an absolute symmetry, which is fascinating. And also, I share about Venus in each individual zodiac sign, what that means, which you can relate to in terms of your natal chart. But also, there's a workbook there that you can work through over this next 4 weeks to enjoy and relish the journey of Venus in the glorious Leo. Please see underneath this video to download your factoid.